Welcome to the Screenaholics Podcast, Episode 8, with my guest, Mitch DeArmon. So, very excited and honored to talk with Mr. DeArmon. He's probably the most experienced podcast guest I've had on the show. Episode 3 with Charlie Deist. Also, I think Charlie's been on a few podcasts. He hosts his own. But I've heard Mitch as a podcast guest on at least 2 other shows, maybe 3, and I'll post those links in the description. But I've been in a men's a community that does men's work with Mr. DeArmon for off and on for the last 8 years, and I've always been intrigued by or attracted to what he has to say. He's always been a source of wisdom and courage, profundity, and humor. So I hope you get that. I hope that comes across in this episode. I would talk more about the specific weekends that he's been involved with, the Sterling Men's Weekend, the Young Men's Ultimate Weekend, and now that he is the co-founder of the Man to Men Weekend. But I don't want you to get lost in little, I think that speaking with him, I can tell that he's less interested in his accomplishments and more interested in the continual betterment of our culture, our community, what ideas are going to help. He likes talking about ideas. There's no doubt about that. He's really excited about what's going to inspire another generation of men to better themselves, to be more responsible, to help others and find meaning in their lives. And so it's my privilege to get to talk to Mitch DeArmon, and I'm also feel lucky to be able to share that with you. If you have any comments, please leave them under the I'm posting this on Spotify and on YouTube. You can comment on the YouTube link. You can also email me. My email address is mjdittmer@gmail.com. Thank you for supporting the podcast. Like and subscribe. Have a blessed day. Please enjoy the conversation with Mitch DeArmon. In 2020, there's a lot of shit that went on that I wish I'd said more about, and but I didn't realize how much I was thinking about being canceled, or like how we're, like looking back a year later or 2 years later, I was like, damn, I wish I'd said more about this. Like now I have all these opinions and resentments.
Well, there was a lot of people hurting a lot of people, and there was a real deceitfulness going on around. That's what they were doing. It was intentional. It was hurtful. And people were pretending that that's not what was happening. They were framing it around some type of justice. And it wasn't. It wasn't about justice. It wasn't about fair. It wasn't about accuracy. It was about, this is going to hurt. How can I hurt you? And it was just messed up stuff they were doing, which is what's panned out in the last couple of years. The truth wasn't being told. Nothing even, not even the shadow of the truth was being told. It was just hurtful shit. Things.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I have this sort of, let me get this one. I won't try to smoothly segue. I'll just go into let me go to these.
Sure.
Whatever I wrote down on this fucking card here.
Well, I hope we got that first part out of the way.
Well, what I was, one thing I was wanting to ask about, was we just had I guess there was a mass shooting in Maine, like 4 or 5 days ago, or 3 days ago even. I don't know. I lost track. I haven't read much about it, but apparently some guy shot up a bowling alley, and they killed 18 people, I think. And I don't know. I was just thinking, like, well, maybe your first reaction was like, well, what's your first reaction to that, I guess, before I make a...
Well, there's 18 families that are not attended to. which is, I think, where the most of the attention should be going right now. We're too busy being interested in whatever we're interested in, the gossip part of the story, not the compassionate part of the story. And so, it's more interested. The gun is more interesting. The psychological part of this person is more interesting. The 18 families, whether it's kids or parents or whatever, is where the attention would be of greatest benefit, and the least interesting, because it's a lot of sobbing and it's a lot of anger and it's a lot of grief, sorrow, and so that doesn't sell much. And so what we're gonna hear about is the part that sells. What's the psychological profile of the guy? What kind of gun did he have? What's his background? I've only heard about it. He had a military background and a military background in arms of some kind. And today I heard, he had a recent breakup and all that, which, okay. And are we going to hear about what happened the previous 5 years in this guy's life? Because that doesn't happen because of one breakup. That doesn't happen because of what happened in the last 2 weeks. Somebody going to that extreme, that's, years of something. That's not days or weeks or months of something. And we're not going to get that story.
Yeah.
They don't have time or desire to produce a real profile of it, which is a big problem with what we got going on today. Is everybody wants to play junior psychologist out of 5-minute clips of a situation rather than years of study. So I don't know what's going to happen. I just hope all those families get some of the attention, because they've been scarred for life.
Yeah, fuck. Yeah. Like that leads me to sort of wonder, like, how do you get compassionate? You know what I mean? Like, that seems like a compassionate response. Like, and in a way you're saying, I mean, our society is lacking in compassion, right? Like, and I think maybe that's a characteristic that hopefully you harbor, is like just compassion as a way to lead with, somehow you lead with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where do you focus it?
Yeah.
Because as soon as you start focusing compassion, then you start losing compassion. So we can start focusing it on the children of survivors. Well, then the parents of survivors lose. So we're creating loss as we start minimizing compassion. And then, because ultimately we're going to be left with who's going to be compassionate towards the shooter.
Yeah.
What did he have going on? Because, it's pretty easy to put this guy in a pretty villainous perspective.
Yeah.
And who wants to hear about everything he has going on based on the amount of damage that he's done? It's a big call to order, and probably decades of spiritual practice to even think of being that kind of compassionate, rather than wanting revenge or wanting justice or any of those other things first. It's like, the guy, and I guess the guy took his own life too. That's the other thing.
Yes, that happened. Yeah.
And so, how does that resolve anything? So we've experienced a whole bunch of loss, and it's not going to get fixed. It's not going to get fixed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a pretty unacceptable answer these days. Here it is, boom, and it's not going to get fixed. And what are you going to do with that? How are we going to live with that? Well, we got two choices. We're either going to live with it together, or we're going to live with it separately. Only one of those makes it bearable. So we're pretty, and what makes it bearable is this phrase I'm working out right now, is touching the untouchable. is that that's what's going to make it bearable. Is we got to be willing to go in and be willing to touch the untouchable, and we got to be willing to have the untouchable touched for these kind of things to be bearable again, because nothing is getting better around this stuff. Is people are becoming more and more isolated, more and more separated, and we got to put on some kid gloves and walk gently into these things, not hastily with harsh and demanding anger and frustration, and because it's worldwide. Here's an instance we're talking about, but this is a worldwide occurrence.
Do you think so? Part of my experience, like I haven't read much about it, but my very little experience with this incident is that like I had a cousin post online. Cousin of mine, she's like maybe 7 years younger than me. She's like one of the kids I learned how to be a mentor to kids around. I wasn't a mentor, but it's just like, oh, you're good with kids because you're babysitting their little cousin or whatever. And now she's like a mom and lives in Europe, and but she posted on the line like another murder, mass murder by a white male, and I'm like, I don't know, I had a reaction to that, but it seemed like but you were talking about the compassion, like this keeps happening and it's an issue, like and you have a men's weekend for men who are the, sometimes we talk about like trying to reach out to men before something like anything like this would happen. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like that's feels like pointing out that it's somebody pointing out, oh, this is another look at male violence. Like when I asked her to elaborate, that's where she went. I was like,
unfortunately, there's giant portions of our society that suffer from the herd mentality, and this phrase white male has been consumed by the herd, and there's atrocities going on around the earth where nobody in the atrocities is white, and nobody is saying, look what those males are doing, and there's very popular things on the media right now, people invading, and there's half of them are white and half of them aren't, and nobody is saying, look at what the white guys are doing here and what the not white guys are doing there. And they're not even really going, look at what the men are doing. They're separating them by races. They're not even creating gender. And so it's a very popular, very hurtful way of doing it, because the person has not practiced the practices necessary to have any real compassion at all, because nobody is doing this who has not been hurt. This guy is not doing it because he's been hurt, and instead of being willing to go touch the untouchable, this is a very easy way to practice a type of superiority that is just riddled with arrogance. It's riddled with conceitedness. It's just saying, I'm better than this person. It's not a solution. It has no answer. It's just, look what they did. And it's like, well, everybody who does this sort of thing, I want to go spend a month or two at their house. Let me come and spend a month or two at your house. Let's see how you do when you take your kid to school, or you drive through traffic, or you go to the library and the grocery store, and let me see how you treat people, and put you under your scrutiny of, whatever. Maybe we ought to go down to your church and hang out. Let's see how you're doing. Because it's a very, and this is what we talk about when we talk about consciousness. It's like, it's not a very conscious thing to be caught in the memetics of our society. It's not very original. There's no depth to it. It's very exclusive to a small portion of the planet.
You said caught in the memetics of our society. Can you what the hell?
Okay.
What are those? Yeah.
So there's underlying currents of information that are traveling around and they're controlling the narrative. Those are memetics.
Underlying currents of information. Yeah.
And most people don't even know that they're running their thoughts. The white male patriarchy is one of them. Or the white male oppression, or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very small portion of what's going on on the planet.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And in our country, since our country has found ways to segregate everything into like white maleness and everything else, it's a very easy way to avoid responsibility to just throw the white male placard on it and not take responsibility for your own affluence. You know, it's like protesting while you're at college. You're
Right.
sitting here at college protesting oppression. You're at college. That's not an oppressive state being at college. You're in an advanced state being at college. It's like it's a little bit ridiculous. You're not in poverty. Even if you qualify for the loans to go to college, you are not in poverty.
Right.
It's like, and to sit there and protest those types of things on a college campus that you go to is a lot of denial about your situation. It could be a level of pretending that lacks character, maturity, and it, you know, in a more harsh, it's a level of ridiculousness. And that's the herd I'm talking about. They just want to have a voice that they haven't really earned because they don't have the intelligence to earn it. They haven't earned it yet.
That's interesting to me, the idea of earning a voice, because I think, you know, hell, having a podcast or having a channel, like you're trying to get your, I mean, a lot of that I know for me is like having the sense of like, oh, I know I have some stuff to say, but I don't know who to say it to. Nobody seems to be listening, you know, a lot of the time. How does one, and like you say, earn a voice? Yeah.
We're trying to earn a voice.
Yeah.
We're going to put it out there.
Yeah, that's right.
And if somebody finds some kind of credibility to what's being said, we'll earn it.
Right.
How you lose credibility in a situation like this is it's really easy to go around and find holes in the subject and shoot it down. But are you bringing something positive to the subject? Are you teaching, or are you just destroying? So it's easy to say white male.
Mm-hmm.
Another white male slaughter.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, okay. You didn't teach anybody anything. There's no greater understanding being shown or proven by that kind of a statement. It's like, what happened to him? Tell me what happened to this guy.
Yeah.
Let me. What could we have done? Well, did he have a psych evaluation recently? Did they let him out of the psych ward recently? Did the psych evaluation that he was given fail? Or was he let out anyway? Maybe that's white privilege. Maybe because of his white privilege, he was let out of his psych evaluation that proved he was incompetent. And now he got white privilege and white male whatever it is that has now caused him to be allowed by the system, the white male patriarchal system, I guess, to destroy all this. Where's all the failures? It's a very small sentence to say, oh, another white male. It's like, oh, okay.
And I guess avoiding the memetics you were talking about is avoiding, like, and you don't just want to go in there and push back the other, like, just to say like, oh, my cousin told me this, so she's you know, she's woke or something like that, is not saying anything either. Like,
it's not.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of statement.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of shallow argument.
Yeah.
Of like, oh wow, she got caught in the memetics of the times, because this woke thing and the white male patriarchy thing, it's waning. It's not as strong as it was 2 years ago. It's going away. Something else is going to take its place. I'm old enough now. I've seen things come and go. It's morphed from, in my lifetime, we've had civil rights turned into feminism, turned into the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next affirmative action, turned into all these things have been turned. We're talking about the same stuff. We're talking about we are applying rules unfairly. It doesn't matter what color, what race you are, the rules are being applied unfairly. We do not have justice. And it doesn't matter who it's to. Is it to the poor person? Is it to the middle class person? Is it to the rich person? The rules are being applied unfairly. You can say they're more unfair to this person or that person. They're being applied unfairly.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's not the same for you as it is for me. Now we got, like, I'm older than you, and now it's more unfair to me. They're taxing my income that has already been taxed. And I'm in double jeopardy, and they won't enforce those rules. And they're taxing your income, and they're going to tax again later. It's like, that's not fair either. Who's going to stand on this?
So what's a constructive approach? I guess, touching the untouchable would be an example of trying to come to a... Tell me more about touching the untouchable, because I think yeah.
Well, the whole idea of it has come up recently because we do not spend the proper amount of time getting to know each other. And we are projecting expectations on each other like we do know each other. So you're supposed to have tolerances for people with and what their situations might be or could be, and approach them appropriate to your imagination of their possible situations, or you could be in violation of them, not knowing anything about them and not having any time to get to know them, but things that you should be considerate of and make up. And this is information that takes psychologists and psychiatrists years to attain from a person. And you're held accountable to it, or you could be canceled. That is not fair. And people who hold that kind of a standard aren't being taught about tolerance. It's like the rules are changing, and I'm not saying that they're changing for worse or better. But what I am saying, if we're going to change rules this quickly, the people who want the rules changed better practice a lot of tolerance, because people don't change this quickly. You are not going to change in 5 years. You are not going to change in 10 years. If we're going to change this quickly, we're going to create imaginary harm. And the ego loves that. The ego loves it. And now the ego is in control of everyone. We are pretending damages now. We have imaginary wounding going on that is felt like the real thing. And when I was in kindergarten, sticks and stones may break your bones, but names will never hurt you, no longer applies. Now imagine that for 60 years, and it all changed in 5.
Yeah.
And I go to work now, and my entire style of being for 60 years, I can now lose my income, I can now be humiliated for my ineptness and old-fashionedness, because out of some position in the world, they changed the criteria. They changed the moral code. I was talking to someone recently, and they implied, they didn't imply, they actually said this, because I asked where does their morality come from? Because I'm under the impression that morality comes from religion, and they said, well, no, it doesn't. I said, well, then where does it come from? Well, everybody has it. I go, well, then why don't I know it? I don't understand your morality that you're coming at me with, because I'm supposed to be a decent person and understand the rules of morality that I don't understand because the rules have changed, and the religion doesn't control it, and I can't find it anywhere. It's undocumented. And
Undocumented.
and now it's innate, but if it's innate, it's connected to a God, which means it's religious. The understanding that the code comes from an innate reality makes it part of a religious or spiritual belief system.
What was this person? Did they strike you as a good representative of this new morality, or do you feel like, is there a good representative? Like, were you?
It was actually in the conversation that was about a person who was pissed off at one of their parents because of their marital status and their marital conduct, and they were claiming to be atheist. But the expectations were of monogamy. And I said, where'd that come from? Was it in their vows? Which I would say that would be about honesty and keeping your word and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay. And they're like, no. I said, then that's the moral thing to do. I said, why? Why is that the moral thing to do if it's not in their vows? That if it's in their vows, it's a personal integrity issue, which I can understand. If it's in their religion and it's in their vows, I can understand it. But if it's just you're supposed to assume it, then it's not connected at all to anything. It's just, this is what I think, and that's what you think.
Mm-hmm. But monogamy is not really a new value, but like the new values you're talking about were like sort of knowing how to not appropriating somebody's culture, or knowing, like, being able to talk about somebody else's. Are they like neurotic? Do you think it's like a neurotic morality?
Well, morality is a value of the Judeo-Christian culture in this country. It's not in every country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's other religions in other countries that don't demand morality, don't demand monogamy.
Yeah.
And in this country, it's not recognized.
The
monogamy is recognized, not polygamy.
Monogamy
is demanded.
Demanded.
But that's connected to a religion.
Right.
And but in the overall scheme of things, it's assumed here. It's so deeply embedded in the memetics of our country, it's assumed. But but if it's not connected to a religion, it's not a morality. In other places of the world, it's perfectly okay. Well, there's other things that are perfectly okay in other parts of the world that we don't do here too. Which ones are okay or not? And I say it's the ones that we talk out loud and agree on. Not just, if you and me start dating, we're just going to assume that we're monogamous. That's a ridiculous assumption based on some memetics that I'm going by that maybe you're not going by.
But if we met in a church, then that would be a different story.
It would be a perfectly average thing to assume, because that's what our religious belief dictates, and we learn that young.
So a lot of the new morality is just Judeo-Christian morality, but allegedly the practitioners of it have allegedly rejected Judaism and Christianity.
The inconvenient parts, which is I mean, you see it in forgive me for the lack of anonymity, but you see it in 12-step programs all the time. It's like, they denounce Christianity all the time by calling it a spiritual program, but if you question the program, they go crazy like you're questioning a religion. It's like, try to change something. Try to say Bill and Bob aren't deities, and they go crazy. It's like, Bill wasn't special. What?
Well, I thought you were going to, like that something you said just sounded like it was straight out of the big book, of Alcoholics Anonymous. But yeah, again, I should probably stop violating traditions also. But,
well, the book is public information.
Yeah. And I think there's something in there about, well, like, I thought highly of Jesus, but not way much like, I accepted those parts which sounded good, but not the parts which were inconvenient, right?
Yeah.
That's from the,
So it's, and that's, I think that's how, when most people change religions or spiritual practices anyway, as soon as it gets hard or boring.
Yeah.
I know for me personally, it's like when it gets boring. You mean you want me to go? That's like yoga, right? You want me to go sit down again and meditate again?
Yeah.
It's like, what's going to come this time? I don't know. That's the point.
Yeah.
The point of meditation is I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not, you don't go meditating on what you know. You go meditate because you don't know. And that's just, what a ridiculous thing to go do. It's like, I'm going to go sit down because I don't know. And somehow I'm going to have faith that as a result of doing that, someday I'm going to know. Well, that means you're going to get old. And you may not ever know. What kind of risk is that to take? I'd rather read some new interesting thing that excites me, gets my adrenaline pumping, and pretend that my adrenaline makes it powerful. That cultivates a high level of emotion, and that emotion that I've generated because of my ego has gotten excited makes with this new information powerful. It's not powerful. It's just that my ego has generated some emotions that I enjoy. Has nothing to do with power.
How are you saying again that the current state of the way we're talking is good for the ego? And do you have the sense of like the ego of the society also? Like,
well, anything that generates a high level of emotion, first of all, says that the ego is in play.
Okay.
Because, and the only way to tame that I understand, is responsibility of action. If the information does not turn into a responsibility for me to take some kind of action, then everything connected to that is just egotism. So if I turn this new piece of information that I've gotten into a discussion with you, and you and me generate an argument about it, and we get hostile, and then all of a sudden we're yelling at each other, and neither of us are going to go do anything about it. Our egos are smashing into each other at a nuclear rate, and nothing is happening. Yet both of us feel something that makes us justified. Our existence is validated because of this point that has allowed us to be human. It has made our humanity. And it's like, and it doesn't matter because nothing is going to happen. Except for noise in the wind.
What do you? I know you've. If I recall, I think I recall you've also talked about like sometimes people talk about ego, and they like in a way that you find it's unproductive. Like people are like you can basically turn it into a way to maybe it's like a humble brag or something like that. I don't know.
Well, so the novice or less than novice, not quite apprenticeship level of things, and this is a media driven attitude, I'd say, is the word ego is generally used by an inexperienced practitioner who has not studied the field of psychology where ego comes from. And they basically use it as an admonishment, an emotional manipulation to control another person. Oh, you're just being egotistical. And what they're trying to do is manipulate the person with a tone of voice. It's attempt at putting themselves in a position of authority with a voice tone they're using. More recently, it's, and some of the things that we've been interested in, it's, oh, that's just toxic masculinity. Or as part of this conversation, well, oh, another white male, which is a condescending tone about whatever you want to think about what a white male is. Pretty generic, overlaying white maleness as something negative in the tone. It doesn't mean anything if you're not vulnerable to the tone, and what makes you vulnerable to the tone is your ego. What are your beliefs about it? And it's like, and if you are not mature, you are very vulnerable to the tone, because there's an emotional investment in approval. When I was young, they used to use the word macho. Oh, you're just being macho. And they would use it in a way that designated it as a negative thing, which was very culturally insensitive to do. Because there's cultures really close by to the United States that being macho is a very preferable thing to be. It is actually the desired outcome. And if you're not, your whole family, your neighborhood is vulnerable. It's a quality that indicates that you protect and provide for your neighborhood, the well-being of your family and friends. When they use that term, it's not you're just a stupid white male who's a dominator.
So that's machismo.
Yeah, it's the abbreviated term of machismo. And it became part of the memetics, and the young men fell for it. And so now men can be manipulated through their immaturity. You're just being macho, and they'll fall in line. And they'll just fall in line. And worse than that is that they will start perpetuating it to other men, like they're doing with the toxic masculinity. There's younger men all over the place that will try to admonish other men by using the term toxic masculinity. But if you ask them what it means, what does that mean? When you use the term toxic masculinity, what are you talking about? You get answers like, well, you know. Everybody knows. And what it ends up being is snails and shells and puppy dog tails. That's what it ends up being. Boys are just snails and shells and puppy dog tails, because it doesn't have any real content in it. It doesn't have a diagnostic behavioral component that's measurable. It's just an admonishment that you're not meeting my approval. When I say you have toxic masculinity, you're just not meeting my approval. Now, would you move the couch? Would you do the hard work? It's very insidious, and it's something that our younger men need to grow out of. I'm not going to say we're going to change people from doing it, because as far as I know, it's been going on my whole life. It's just kind of a part of what goes on in culture, but you're supposed to outgrow it. And that's the work of men between men.
How at what point in your life did you kind of have a sense of men need to do some work amongst, like, you know, in other words, like, we can go into like where my cousin was right in that, like, you know, because the white male thing is very herd mentality, but if you take the race part out of it, you know, then if you just say like, well, male violence, you know, and males have, you know, men are different than women, so what, you know, and at what point do we, like, did you, I don't know, like I was raised in the whole modern sensibility of like, well, we're all the same, you know, and it took me a long time to be, you know, in a world where men get together and try to help other men, and, you know, well, I like to help women at some point too, but like I know that somehow I can benefit. I'm better at helping men. Like maybe there's one woman I can help out. I'd probably try to help one woman somewhere and help her out a lot if I can find that one woman. But like the idea of, oh, I'm going to help women, that's probably not going to work as well.
I think first of all we got to quit disrespecting women.
Yeah.
And when I say that, what I mean is one of the first ways that men need to quit disrespecting women is the men have to let go of the knight in shining armor. Is that a man has to quit pretending that that a woman needs a knight in shining armor. All that knight in shining armor sees is a woman that is incompetent. All he sees is a damsel in distress that he's got to be armored up for with his shiny, sharp sword and his big shield to, you know, barge through the world with, so that she can walk safely wherever she wants to go. And anything gets in her way, he is responsible to make sure that it's not in her way. And if anything threatens her freedom, he is there to make sure that she has her freedom. And if that guy is still the predominant character in a man's life, he is not ready to respect women. He does not have the tools necessary because he is stuck inside that frickin' armor. That armor that he is...
clunky.
It is clunky. It's heavy. It sinks. It sinks really well. It gets rusty. You know, he has gotta get that armor off so that he can see her, so that he can really see this person.
Yeah,
I was gonna say chick, so he can see this chick who has basically lived a life before she ever met him. Probably had a boyfriend before she ever met him. Maybe even had sex before she ever met him, which qualifies her for a few skills. Maybe had a job before she ever met him. Did some things, went on trips, you know, different states, different countries before she ever met him. Which means that this is a fully operating, functional, competent human being who can go out into the world and make it without him. And he needs to see her as that person. Not see her as, I'm going to move in now and fill in all of the gaps for her incompetencies. Because that's a bad partnership. Don't get, and I would tell a young man, do not get in a partnership with somebody you see as incompetent, because that would be stupid. Why would you pick an incompetent partner?
Yeah.
In the world of monkeys and chimpanzees, and you don't go looking for the incompetent chimpanzee to mate with. You go get the competent one who can feed themselves, clothe themselves, climb the tree and get the nuts and bananas and protect the offspring themselves, because that is expected of primates, is that they don't need a big ape to protect the offspring only, that the female offspring are vicious, savage, destroyers of threats also. It's not a bipolar responsibility. Both partners are a threat to things that are threatening. It's a partnership. They're not weak. They're not waiting for you to kiss them and wake them up and because they took a bite out of the apple. It's like you have a fully functioning, high quality, high fidelity creature on your hands, and she needs to bring all those characteristics to the relationship. Not you sacrifice some of your best characteristics to try to make up for the ones that you're pretending she doesn't have. Because that's what the knight in shining armor is doing. He pretends that she doesn't have a whole bunch of characteristics. And the worst thing that happens when if she's the kind of person that uses that, she gets lazy. She'll get lazy. And he'll be overworked, over-demanded, blah, blah, blah. And that relationship will not function well. Because he'll be doing way too much of the wrong things, and she'll be doing way too little of the right things. And so, she does all the things that she wants to do that are really great and brings all of her best to the relationship. He brings all his best to the relationship. If the family is threatened, they line up together and they slaughter everything that needs to be slaughtered together. You can think of this financially, economically, whatever. Mm-hmm. And they both watch out for the children, which is if they have children, or if they want to go to Europe, they both throw the money in the kitty and they go to Europe together and do whatever they want to do together. They do it together. They have a partnership, not a you do you and I do me. It's like, no, there's no you do you and I do me. It's like the partnership is the things we do together. And if one person is being lazy and the other person is being inappropriate, delusional, that never happens. He takes off the armor. He does what he's good at. She does what she's good at. They use all those resources, and they create something bigger than both of them. The partnership model is something greater than the sum total of its parts. That's their job. Is two people can create and build something better than the sum total of the parts. That's what a partnership is for. Not, I got my own individuality and you got your individuality. That's like pathetic, childish shit. And that's what's happened in the last 70 years is that these relationships don't mature. And at the point of maturity, they fail because they're too busy remaining with childish ideas. They're trying to stay children when what they should be doing is letting go of their identity to create something better than an identity. And what that better is love. When love is the only thing that will carry the relationship forward, they choose to be themselves. And love can't exist. Because love is between them, not them.
You mentioned you mentioned a bunch of things there, but one thing I remember is that you said in the last 70 years.
Mm-hmm.
Why 70 years? I mean, and of course you have to generalize, right? Like there's been good relationships and bad relationships all through this. But do you think that the 1950s maybe a trend developed of like that's
I'm
70 years
thinking.
ago. Is
I'm
the
thinking
50s.
more of this. I was born in 1959, and it's which is probably why I use that, because I've seen it all happen in
Your
my
lifetime.
lifetime.
Yeah.
And it's probably going on before my lifetime to some degree. You know, the ball was rolling to whatever degree.
Yeah.
Try to stay within my own experience. You know, I grew up in a family that, you know, my grandmother left my grandfather, did not want, did not expect, gave no thought to anything called child support. When she got rid of the man, she got rid of the entire man, didn't want to have anything to do with him.
Yeah.
And took my mom and left, and she made it work. So it wasn't like, it wasn't a strategy to get rid of him. He thought of infidelity and brought it to her, and she said bye.
Well, like, hey, should we see other people?
No, I was thinking about seeing another person, and she said, okay, go ahead, bye.
Probably some fear there.
Well, these days, dude would probably be treated like he was being open.
Yeah. What a great guy.
Yeah, he's being open and honest.
Hey, how you doing?
So,
We're going to take all this apart, so sorry to butt you.
it's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Real life stuff. Yeah, so, and to see that kind of independence, she was a Rosie the Riveter, worked for the military, put together ships, put together blah, 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 for Korea and World War II. So, you know, she was out there.
Yeah.
And so I was around those kind of people.
Yeah.
And then this other thing came about the generations of people who deserve. She was also a Native woman who had to get out of Texas because in her childhood they were still exterminating natives in Texas. So she had to flee a state in order to be safe. That's the early 1900s.
Yeah.
And everything that goes with that.
Yeah. So individualism is, you've seen in your lifetime. It's probably been going on a long time.
Mm-hmm. And more importantly than that, that responsibility far outweighs identity. Knowing what you're responsible for in your life far outweighs who you think you are.
That's the solution to that identity problem.
Mm-hmm. And that's what growing up is. Growing up is not know yourself better. Grow up is, regardless of whatever you think you are, take care of your responsibilities. If you have a car, you know, change the oil, and if you have kids, feed them.
So, going back to like the like working with men particularly, as opposed to like, you know, working with everybody all together is part of it. Like, I mean, I had written down something about education here. Like, in a way, you think that teaching people how to have a relationship and how to love is something that maybe was like just more needed, or is, and maybe that's why there's this benefit to men working with other men, because just sort of talking about, well, how do you have a relationship? Because there's a lot of these delusions that men have about what a woman is.
Well,
what is a woman? Yeah.
What is it? What is a woman? No, what I think is that if you don't understand the discipline that comes with living your life by like a principle like commitment, you don't have a chance at love. Because commitment keeps you from giving up when you should. and every part of your being says, I should give up, I should quit, I should give up, like this is too hard, this is ridiculous, blah blah blah. And according to me and my belief system, love is greater than we are. And so without commitment, you don't have an opportunity to move into the realm of love. Because what I've experienced with my wife is it is totally unreasonable to love somebody. It's not logical. It doesn't make sense. You can't explain it. You know, they try to in all kinds of different ways, but when love is the only thing that will keep things together, most people choose something else. They choose negotiation, they choose conversation, they choose explanation, they choose all kinds of things. And there comes a time, and there has come times when you just got to quit talking about it and love each other, because that other person is that other person.
Yeah.
And that is all there is to them. That's all there is to them. And me too, by the way. You know, there's been times I have done things being married in my life, and there's no reason. I don't deserve to be forgiven. I haven't earned it. There's no restitution to be paid. And somehow my wife finds a way to get up another day and do whatever it is we do that we call being married, and we do it again. And the other way around too. There's been times that she has done the unspeakable, just unexplainable, bizarre thing that there's no amount of dialogue, no amount of even make-believe forgiveness. Oh yes, because there's a certain arrogance to, like, I'm gonna forgive you.
Yeah.
That is way closer to God than I am.
Right.
That is necessary. And so all you do is you try to, in those times, is you try to just make another step a little closer to love. And you may, and you don't really know if you made it, but you try. And maybe 5 or 8 years after that, you may realize that you've made it another, step or two. You may not have, but at least you think you might have. And there's all this information that's going around these days with, and in my more comedic sense is like, I always like to make fun of like the Dr. Phil, Oprah relationship mentality, where they think that all these little tricks and psychotherapeutic things are some part of this stuff. There's just a spirit to it that they can't touch it, and they're just, you can't make TV shows on it. You just got to keep living.
Yeah.
And you got to keep going, and you have to be committed to it, and that means no matter what.
Yeah.
That means no matter what. You can't explain having your partner sitting there in a bed after cancer surgery, day in and day out, wanting to die, not wanting to eat, blah, 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 sutures and gauze and blah, blah, blah. How do you explain that? How do you explain, seeing your partner come out of open heart surgery with stitches and gasping when the anesthesia wears off and all that stuff? How do you explain what that is in a, he cussed at me, or she spent the dog money on fingernails, or where's the argument? It's like a relationship has so much more in it in time than this negotiation over like who crashed the car and how are we going to pay the insurance and all that all of that stuff never addresses. Never.
Yeah.
And you don't even know what that is. They don't even have words for those feelings. When you see, your child, in a hospital bed, injured, they don't have words for that. And so you hope that is love.
Yeah.
You hope that's love, and that's not like this feels good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're not sitting there going, this feels good.
Huh.
And their explanation is there's a concussion and we have to do more testing. And the feeling you have is love. And you can't do anything with it.
Huh.
That doesn't make good television.
Right.
And so a lot of the herd grabs a hold of these other things and tries to make life sound more interesting than that.
Yeah.
And it's actually, that's what life is.
You have you adopted your kids. Did you discover your kids with your wife? Like, is I hear like you found your kids in San Francisco or?
No, but I stay away from the subject.
Okay, all right.
But today may not be the day. Because there's a huge amount of objectification that has happened in the process, quote unquote, the process, which is a phrase I hate. The process. And here's what I want to say about that.
Yeah.
Adoption is one day. It's one day. And then you have kids. And there is a dissociative quality that we've been trained into through systems. And this is the same as I think it's the same as blended families. It's one day. And after that, they're your children. They're not your adopted children. They are your children. They're not your special children. They're not your exceptional children. They're not your other kind of children. They're your children. They go through the same things that children go through in every grade, every step of the way. And every time somebody adds a tagline, step or whatever, all you're doing to that kid is giving them one step out of the circle. You're saying you kind of. Because you have this thing. And the entire process is to get that thing out. There is no thing between me and my children. There's nothing between us. They can talk about it however they want to talk about it. That's up to them. I equate it to how they talk about it is they're free to talk about it. How I talk about it is these are my children. We spent one day in a process that the government put in place. I didn't put it in place.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and it's for life. There's no expiration date. There's no, and it's over now. It's for life.
Yeah.
And so leading up to that day, they objectify the shit out of you, out of them, to try to promote the process. They market it to try to they make businesses out of it from in other countries and in this one. And what gets done is this separation where it's forever. Somebody isn't all the way in. Who pays for that?
The kid.
Right.
No.
So if you want to say, like, I'm almost a dad, hey, you're never going to really be a dad. Here, you want to go through this process right here? You're never going to really be a mom. It doesn't really work.
Huh.
Because we're always going to put this tag on it.
Uh-huh.
And you know, you can treat them like they're your own. You can treat them just like that.
Yeah.
Isn't that horrible? Isn't that horrible?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've experienced one time when somebody said it in front of all of us, trying to tell me and my wife how special we are because we treat our children like they're our own. How much damage do you think happened in that moment?
Yeah, I guess it would depend on how old were the kids.
They're like 10
Yeah.
and 7 and 5.
Yeah.
And they gave meaning to something. By doing that, they gave meaning to something. They put a meaning on their life by doing that. And they gave meaning to the relationship between me and my children. I didn't ask for. And they didn't ask for. Because it's part of the herd.
Is that like an example of where like the ego is that the ego taking credit for something and taking a huge step back when it does that kind of?
They thought that they were saying something that was the
Nice,
thing
yeah.
to say.
Yeah, yeah.
Here's the thing to say to then they're trying to validate ours.
Right.
But they didn't have the experience of the process to have any sense, and I mean literally, any sense about what they were saying. They were saying something that trying to generate some kind of emotional connection between their little speech and the room that we were in. And it probably worked for most of the people in the room, but it didn't work for us. So it ended up being inconsiderate.
Right.
And it's just like, really? Can you tell I have a little passion behind this subject? Because it's just a ridiculous thing that they've done with it. And instead of the relief that it's supposed to get, it turns into this lifelong freaking thing that doesn't need to be brought up. And now it's almost a thing that gets confessed with for some with this little thing of maybe a little guilt, maybe a little shame. I'm not quite like the other kids. Instead of, this is my family. What's meant to be, this is my family.
Mm-hmm.
It's turned into something else.
Tell me about like what was your wife like before and after you did your weekend? If that's a cool.
She was a little apprehensive.
Oh, sorry, not your wife like. Your wife like.
My life like?
Yeah. But I guess you were married before you did your weekend.
You know, so I was like a butcher and shit, and you know, I had like a career job and in the union and all that regular, you know, trajectory stuff that way, but I was going crazy because I was kind of driven to being a counselor, and
So you were a butcher, but you were interested in being a counselor.
Yeah. Got sober, but I didn't really. I was scared of doing that, and after the weekend I just fucking had to do it. I mean, I got in the bad habit of saying fuck it to things. Are we recording right now?
Yep.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, so I I did that. I sold my Jeep and bought a Harley. That one right there.
Oh no shit.
Yeah. Used to be green.
What model
It's a
is
Road
it?
King,
Okay.
but it doesn't look like a Road King anymore.
So, I have a friend who keeps going on, and he's a friend from a meeting, who is on and on about how, like, Harleys are different than motor. He's not a Harley guy. He's a motorcycle guy. He's trying to, like, how's a Harley different from what's a Harley compared to a motorcycle to you?
So I've had more than Harleys. Yamaha, Honda.
Mm-hmm.
My dad had a Harley, so that I got a kind of a romantic connection to it. Also, but as far as anything else, what I tell anybody is figure out what kind of riding you're going to do and get that bike.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you want to ride 180 miles an hour, don't get a Harley. If you want to lay it down sideways and freaking do all that, he's going to pull that chair. If you want to lay it down sideways and go, really hard, don't get a Harley. Because it'll take you a long time to practicing to be able to ride a Harley that way, because they're so heavy. But if you want to be cool and be a motorcycle enthusiast and get a Harley. But it really and even when you are thinking about what kind of riding you're going to do, get the right Harley for what kind of riding you're going to do. Because it's a pain in the ass having the wrong bike.
So, can you give me like a sort of a tour of men's weekends, like going back to men's weekends? Like,
okay.
You've got, I mentioned we were sort of talking about the Sterling Men's Weekend a minute ago, but you've been around a bunch of men's weekends. So,
okay.
like, what the hell? What's up with these men's weekends, or what was your experience like getting to know them, and how do you describe them?
Oh, well, I'll tell you my version of how about men's work?
Okay.
What they call men's work. There's So one of the things that has been recalibrating in for years now, but probably since the Industrial Revolution, really. Since
Okay. Yeah.
is
More than 70 years.
More than 70 years is with organized armies and agriculture, massive agriculture,
urbanization,
all that is what's a man going to do?
Yeah.
What's his role? What's his responsibility? When I say role, I mean what's his responsibility socially? I think that one of the big confusions all over the United States is, they started only telling the stories of the most successful. I mean, we lost some of the stories of the average everyday stories of even some of the rich people, that what they did to and they actually got turned into scandalous kind of scandalous kind of stories, but they're pretty average, really. Like have you heard of the book PT 109?
No.
That's John F. Kennedy in the war.
Okay.
So
John F. Kennedy in the World War II.
World War II, I believe.
What? How he didn't get to do it?
No, he was on a boat. He was on the ship. He was in the war. He was overboard. He was,
Okay.
He went through some stuff. Same is true of George Bush. He went through some stuff and he survived where other people didn't. And then all of a sudden they're telling stories of, like the Say Hey Kid, Willie Mays story, where it was really popular. Stop. Sit down, Buster. Sit down. It was really popular to paint the picture of the average Joe American just doing what he was doing. It wasn't, everybody wasn't a heroic story, but they were popular stories. Like Jim Thorpe he didn't end up in a whatever. Audie Murphy played, I think Jim Thorpe, was it Jim Thorpe? Ended up being a drunk, but he was at where they lifted the flag, the famous Iwo Jima flag or whatever.
Oh yeah. In Vietnam, actually.
No, that was World War II.
Oh.
So, okay. but there's there was a lot of literature on Americana kind of literature out there where what average Americans did, just pioneers, of, we, and some of the stories that I think that should have been told, that Buffalo Soldier stories and stuff. All that stuff was all those stories were being told.
Yeah.
Which I think made America possible. Instead of everybody grows into being a college graduate, Yale, Harvard, whatever, blah 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 blah. Instead of work hard, work in the factory, make a living. Those stories were being told too. Not the Cinderella Man. Boxer stories and all kinds of stuff. There's a diverse bunch of different ways of people getting through life in America.
Yeah.
And so I think that we've gone from that into the sensationalizing of everything, and so what it appears is that there's only very few acceptable outcomes. So coming up, becoming a plumber, becoming a butcher, having a family, and getting on with it is, not saving the galaxy is not really an acceptable outcome. Now you can fantasize about different ways of accepting it. It's kind of like a Jesus syndrome. You got to have a way now with the internet. You can play Space Commander and you can save us from the aliens, which is very childish and very, I guess what they call the Jesus syndrome, where you're going to save the world from itself and all that stuff. And that gets a lot more press in the Marvel Comics mentality, that there's got to be these heroes and stuff. And some years ago it was like the Pony Express was a big deal. The stories of average, like Kit Carson lived in Sedona, Arizona, and he found all these trails to get us across the Sierras. And those books were the books that were in school.
Yeah.
About accomplishments that just people accomplished shit. They weren't all these great George Washington Carver inventing stuff. It's like that was average everyday school stuff where we could all be like, we could all think, because that's what's not going on is we're not thinking anymore.
It's maybe even accelerated by the pandemic. Like there's even less things you can do now. Maybe like even in the last 5 or 10 years. I mean, there's maybe less movies or less. I don't know. Like I feel like there's less books now. Like
and you shouldn't try.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't try. I mean, it's. I posted a post up on Facebook about think for yourself. Don't pass on memes. Sit down in the morning, think for yourself, come up with some ideas. Organize your thoughts, put them out there. But see if you can come up with thoughts that you haven't heard of before. Mm-hmm. Take a few different thoughts and intertwine them together and create a thought, a more complex thought from a number of different thoughts, and put them out there. Because that kind of ingenuity is what we're lacking. Where it's because what we got now is just people are arguing over people's thoughts off the internet of people they haven't even met, and they don't know where the thought came from. And people are getting hostile over it, and it's like, and they're one-line memes that they've shared.
Yep.
It's like if you're gonna get pissed at somebody, it's like, well, if somebody's gonna get pissed at you, well, make sure it's your thought they're getting pissed at.
Right.
That's what I've for years now. I've sat up. I get up in the morning. I pray, I meditate, and then I post an idea.
Yeah.
It's like, and people respond. I get 60, 70 responses a day about like some people are pissed and some people aren't, and because I just it could be something simple like post your own stuff. It's like, quit posting other people's stuff all over the internet. Post your own stuff. Quit arguing over the conspiracy theory. It's like, that conspiracy is not real. It's like, I get the real facts off the same internet you're looking on because I know where to look. And that's what they're arguing over.
Let's argue about geopolitics or what's going on behind closed doors that we don't know really what's going on about. Yep.
And I spend thousands of hours on the same internet with the same machine that you have, but mine's more legitimate. And it's like and then you get upset, boo-hooing over the fact that people are like going like, you're just negative. I don't even know how I got on that tangent.
There's less that's acceptable to. It seems like there's less that's acceptable for men. Less acceptable outcomes. Just being a plumber, just being a butcher is almost
there's the idea that there's less acceptable. Yeah. All of the same jobs are getting done.
Okay.
Depending on where you live. I got a good friend of ours who moved out of Marin County because every time he went out to a restaurant or to a bar to meet people, the first thing that he noticed was that they were checking his car keys
to see like what he drove.
See what he drove.
Okay.
And this guy's not poor.
Yeah.
But he's got this overwhelming sense that the only thing that really mattered was he had to show something about himself, that how he was being selected, because he was already clear on the fact that when it comes to relationships and it comes to dating, it's the woman who actually, the man may do the asking, mm-hmm. but the woman does the selecting. Mm-hmm. And he didn't like, there was too many people in that arena that he didn't like how they were selecting.
Yeah.
That they had to have a certain narrow piece of information.
Yeah.
and being a man, being objectified in that way, was so distasteful to him, it was worth moving out of that county.
Yeah.
And because in that county especially, the women are very vocal about being the ones who are objectified. And he was so angry, he got to the point where he couldn't treat women well at all, because he was so angry over the fact that he was always under the burden of ridicule by women for objectifying them for sex and blah blah blah, when nobody is even touching the untouchable, right? Nobody is addressing this issue of women picking men for material, for their material
Yep.
ability.
Yep.
What do you bring a material to my life?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't really care what you look like and how you feel or what you're thinking. It's like, that car is going to show me something about your status in my life, which gives me status.
Yeah.
Not who you are.
Yeah.
I can put up with who you are. You're not that difficult.
It's not that important. Yeah.
So
So in this climate where men's what a man is changed.
mm-hmm.
Men's work is out there. What was you and Scott were doing some groups before you did the men's weekend, I guess.
Yeah.
But were you aware of men's work right away and all that, or was that?
So what we got to was we got to the level of with groups of men that was it got intellectual enough. We got.
He was saying you had some co-ed groups.
We got. In order to trigger deeper emotions, we had to include women, because we got intellectually competitive.
Uh-huh.
You know, who knows the book better? Who knows the wisdom? Who's got the wisdom of this one? We actually picked a book. We were reading a book on some deeper childhood psychology stuff. We had some very guys who were very adamant about precision, accuracy of the information, how to use the information, blah blah blah. And but also in that book it said, to get any deeper personally, if you and these arguments start to ensue, you're probably not getting any deeper, but those arguments are triggered by this depth that you're not accessing. And to access it, you may need the other gender involved. And so, and you better prepare them, because this isn't going to be pretty. So we had no idea what that meant. So we went out and hired a facilitator that we thought was going to control us. And so manage all these tattooed biker, freaking maniac people. And we started going to some Codependence Anonymous meetings and told these, in our leathers and all this other stuff, and told these gals what we were up to. And there's a few brave souls that stepped up to the plate. And oh yeah, it was tremendous. And we started getting into it, and we had no idea what we were getting into. And what came out of it was a depth of I would of very contained experience that all of us were basically protecting the world from. That we had so much pain inside of us that we could not be really honest about life, because it was so explosive and so some of it was revolting, but some of it was big. That like we're afraid to like let it out, because it's like, what's this going to do to the people around me? It was actually an act of like, it was actually an act of nobility to fucking keep it contained, because we had no idea what kind of disaster this was going to cause. Because to a man, in each and every one of us, that's what it felt like. If I let this out, this is going to do nothing but harm.
This is how many men you're saying?
It was 6.
Okay.
And what came of that was, well, to this day, everybody that we know of, only one of the guys is still alive. One guy blew his brains out. One guy, we think he's dead. He OD'd, I think. They found him in a trailer in a field. Another guy moved away. Women, one of them quit because she could not believe that men were hurt. That's another one of the big disbelief moments. Like she really could not grasp that we were in pain. She thought we were just being violent. It was.
That's kind of like this other misunderstanding I was talking about. Yeah.
And because and you know it was a very easy mistake to make, because we looked the.
Yeah. You're not showing. You're not showing. We're trying to put the vulnerability out there.
Yeah. And so I mean, there was a price being paid, and a lot of grief work was being done. And in that grief work, there was more grief work that needed to be done, because not everybody made it.
Right.
But what it turned into is really a life purpose for both me and Scott. Is like, because what we found out in the middle of it, because it goes through chronologies of time, is one of the things that was noticeable is how men transfer from childhood into adulthood in culture is they have social responsibility. Is that they're given, you have a responsibility to the tribe, to the society, to the blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. That
allows you to become bigger than your pain. And the emphasis is on how important you fulfilling those responsibilities are to the survival of your people. And that importance is what helps you supersede the pain of what a childhood is. It wasn't like a specific set of things happened to you or me. It was like every child.
Yeah.
In the pristine tribal childhoods of the movies, every childhood is painful, because they get told no 1,000 times. They get not allowed to. They're made to do things other than go play and get fed. They have to go take responsibilities that they don't want to. Yeah. You know what I mean? They fall down and go boom 1,000 times. They fall out of the trees. They do all kinds of stuff.
Purpose,
yeah.
Responsibility. Yeah.
And and what initiations were, in tribal initiations was the transition for the young males to go from average, everyday, childish, selfish, self-centeredness, self-delusion, fear, self-seeking, and self-pity, to responsibilities for the well-being of the tribe.
Okay. That's men's work. Yeah.
That's men's work.
Yeah.
Also, if you want to take notice,
Yeah.
the childish condition is all of the conditions, characteristics, and qualities of an active alcoholic.
Okay.
Selfish, self-centered. So that's why so many times they spend time talking about selfish and self-centered. Well, that's just childishness. And then they have 12 stepped into emotional sobriety. It's like, right, because they're childish.
Uh-huh.
Driven by fear is what a child is driven by. How am I going to get hurt? Who's going to take care of what?
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to be okay? How am I going to be taken care of? It's all regular childishness. It's not, self-deluded. Every child is. It's the same. It's the same work. It's the same work. And all of a sudden, we get introduced to this thing called men's work, and it's basically it's the same work. It's the same work there, like you just said. That's men's work. It's like, and it's also the sum total of almost every psychotherapeutic process. It's like, how do you heal every childhood wound? What's the goal of healing in every childhood wound? To quit acting like a child. You're supposed to now learn how to relate to this stuff and see this stuff in a way that you don't act like a child anymore. That's what ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, is. It's adult children. It's not adult children of alcoholics. It's adult children of alcoholics. and so it's all the same stuff, and through the marketeers, they found ways to re-market it, revamp it, re-put it out there, and it's the same information. Biblically, it's before I was a man, I thought like a child, I acted like a child, I blah, blah, blah. After I became a man, I had to put away all of my childish ways. I mean, put them away. It doesn't mean like revisit them.
What's that a quote from?
The Bible.
Okay. What really?
Yeah.
Which do you know?
Obama said it in his in one of his speeches. But it's biblical.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's the same, and I think it's the same. It's the same. It's also that's the explanation in Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
They were in the Garden of Eden when they were acting like children.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they decided that they could do whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I don't know, I can do it.
Yeah, they took freedom, which God gives us.
Mm-hmm.
And then with that comes a lot of.
And they willfully did what they knew they shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Which is what children do.
Yeah.
Whether it be turn the station on the television, it doesn't have to be this big drama. It's like when you're little, it's like, sneaking a cigarette. Or whatever it is. It's like you willfully do it. It's not a, oh my God. Those are developmental explanations. They're not like, oh my God, you've committed the worst sin of any sin ever.
Would you say that like then at that time, at that moment, like when you guys were doing that, and you're in your 30s, probably just married or something, were you experiencing that moment kind of for yourself, like, oh, I'm passing out of, like, I'm running up against it, I'm feeling all this pain, and then as soon as you felt it and you found this way to like share it, help others with it, is it kind of like, was that your experience getting involved?
So there's a borderline confidentiality thing right now.
Okay.
So there's when I completed the Sterling Men's Weekend, I had an overwhelming sense of responsibility. So we're talking about the end of the weekend. I had an overwhelming sense of responsibility in the never again. And because being charged with that responsibility for men.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, it kind of coalesced all of the work we'd done to that point, I'd done to that point, over, something you said earlier, where, and something I heard in 12-step rooms, men with the men, women with the women, where when I first heard it, I heard it as kind of a sexual, because too many people were having sex with each other or something, and and the men were villains and blah blah blah. And in that context, I heard it more of a because we could help each other.
Yeah.
And we could help each other, first of all, by understanding the truth, not in a way that the truth is understandable, not in a some prophetic thing, truth, just a kind of an average everyday. No, that's not what I experience. I experience withholding my feelings because I'm afraid of hurting people with them. Which is very, very common with men. I'm not expressing my feelings because I'm emotionally unavailable. I'm emotionally unavailable so I don't destroy you.
Yeah.
And we've seen hundreds of those men at Man to Man and elsewhere, where these men for years have been judged and diagnosed, and this one version of the story told about men being emotionally unavailable and can't express their feelings, rather than these men have the nobility, the intelligence to not do it because they love the people around them so much that they don't want those people harmed, even if it means that they're going to get sick, they're going to die younger, they're going to suffer all kinds of other mental, psychological illnesses by not doing it. But if they do it, they know that in the wrong place at the wrong time, they're going to be out of control, and they know it, and so they stuff their feelings into compartments somewhere inside their body and in their brain, where they end up experiencing disease later. And we've seen that all the time.
Yeah.
Many, many, many times a year.
Yeah.
Which is kind of circles us back around to this guy on the East Coast.
Yeah.
How much stuff, and in my world of junior psychology, it's like, I'd like to know where he shot himself.
Mm-hmm.
Because that probably is going to be an indicator where the majority of the pain was.
In a church or at a store or
in the
house
head,
or,
in the chest, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Is he or did he shoot himself, or did he hang himself, or did he?
Yeah.
I just assume, since guns were involved, that he shot himself, but I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know that. I'm not familiar enough with the situation to know what the case is.
Yeah.
But that's a far cry away from, I mean, I wouldn't have even known that the guy was white because of the way I think.
Mm-hmm. Until
you said something. and nor do I care.
Right.
It's like, if that's what's happened, it's like, who cares about that? But that's not termed racism either. And it should be.
Yeah.
It's like, nobody's going to go to that person and go, why are you being racist? Because there's plenty of people of color who are killing them, plenty of men of color.
That's what I was kind of trying to do, but it's like, but then that part's less interesting to me than this whole, like, we as men, the man woman living together thing. I think that's like, because that's part of men's work too. It's like you went straight to it, like respecting women.
Mm-hmm.
So like what we're trying to figure out in men's work in part, is how to handle our emotions and grow up.
Mm-hmm.
How to handle our emotions, how to grow up and take responsibility, and how to live in a grown-up relationship.
Well, and since my wife hates me talking about this, I'm going to talk about it with you. Well, the issue, the other untouchable issue that never gets addressed if we remove ourselves from the victim conversation, the conversation that is the untouchable conversation is the woman relationship. And I don't mean lesbian relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, how are these women getting along with each other?
Yeah.
And in my personal experience, having 3 daughters, and all of them from elementary school on, and listening to what their business lives have been like, because they're all been involved with business, and blah blah. The woman relationship is an atrocity. And in the other arenas that I experience women, how women treat each other, the judgments they have about each other, is horrible. It's like they trust each other when they're all victims, and they can give a voice to who's been victimized by who and by what and how and blah blah blah. But when it comes down to time for them to start talking about, like, how do you get treated by other women? How were you treated in junior high school by the other girls? It's like all that bullying stuff went away when they started making it about, like, this during conversation. The bullying happens verbally too. All that bullying stuff that was popular, 6 or 7 years ago, that shit went away when they started applying it to girls.
Because they don't want to talk about it.
It's untouchable. Because nobody is going to hold them responsible for talking the way they talk to each other. I've met way too many girls who are devastated in their relationships with other girls. Devastated. They're devastated by their mothers, which you can't say, because that's the untouchable things, is how these mothers treat their daughters. It's not like a bunch of dads doing the body shaming, teaching their daughters how to put on makeup. Mm-hmm. It's not a bunch of dads saying, "Hey, you ought to go have some breast augmentation, honey."
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
So part of men's work is respecting women enough to give them maybe the space where they can have those conversations.
No, we can't do it. No. Women have got to.
That's what I mean. But
they've got to take the time and space, and we got to get out of their way.
Yeah.
However, what we keep on seeing is that they abdicate responsibility for taking that space.
Yeah.
And they'll let a man lead a women's weekend because a woman won't do it. Men, Dr. Phil is popular because a man will do it. Why isn't there a woman doing that work instead of him?
Who's the next Oprah?
Without it having to be just an average woman, just an everyday woman.
Yeah.
Without a special marketable quality or characteristic.
Yeah.
It's like have you ever seen The View? How they treat each other?
I don't have not enough to have the sense
check
of
it
how
out.
They treat each other.
Just check it out.
Yeah.
How they talk to each other,
yeah.
And especially if they disagree.
Okay. Yeah.
It is what it is. But if you, and that's on television where they can, where they're limited. But I mean, I have 3 daughters who come home crying because of the way other girls treat them, and that's not on the media.
Yeah, so that's another response to the talk about male violence, is that females aren't exactly
And how many men have you ever met the way that they get talked to by their women?
Yeah.
Humiliated for the job that they do or the job that they haven't done for their.
And it's not a competition who's worse or anything like that.
It's not at all.
We're trying
but it's not even touched.
Yeah.
It's a conversation that is not brought up. It's like on the accountability side. It's like we've turned this corner around. We want to hold people accountable. On the male side of it, is men take responsibility. The victims want to hold somebody accountable. But the same victims will not go, and I'm responsible for, because that's blaming the victim. It's like, how can I go into a place half naked and fucking expect people to not objectify me?
Yeah.
You went into a public place half naked, and you're going to be upset that somebody looked at you?
And part of men's work is getting we have the delusional men who are abetting that narrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we gotta
It's like,
together
well,
we can at least get real. And,
yeah.
And then
Monkeys
understand
look
all you
at
do
each
is-
other
Yeah.
lustfully.
Yeah.
It's like the expectation isn't even in a natural world isn't reality. So are we having are we having the untouchable conversations? Well, in this dialogue, women won't with each other. They
Right.
won't.
Right.
I used to do workshops with mothers. And you know what mothers want to talk about?
They're men. Yeah.
Fathers.
Mitch DeArmon, I don't want to take any more of your time because I know you got somewhere to go. So thanks for being on the Screenaholics with me. Maybe you'll come again after your upcoming trip to San Diego, and I know there's another Man to Man weekend coming up soon. So, but thanks for all you do with our community, and appreciate your time.
Party on.
Yeah.